Mom and dad is a way of life. You get to fly to the most exotic countries in the world, play diplomat, and count the money. We told you about Hunter's escapades, from being bribed with Chinese diamonds to funding a Russian sex trafficking ring. But we just found out Hunter has some competition. His name, Paul Pelosi Jr. As far as we can tell, he's never had a real job, the kind where you have to punch a clock. So what does Paulie Jr. do all day? Well, last week, Nancy snuck little Paulie on her plane to Asia with his mom. But if you look closely at the photos, there he is. Paulie P. Jr., about as unqualified as Hunter, with all the big dogs there in Asia. He was also caught by foreign photographers in Singapore and Japan. The U.S. press, who covered every move Nancy made in the Pacific, somehow never noticed that her son Paul was along for the ride. You didn't know he went to Ukraine? Well, yeah, we didn't either. You won't find any trace of this on the Speaker's website.
Gentlemen, please be seated. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Chairman Meeks, Chairman Takano, Vice Chairperson Delbene, Chairman Krishnamurti, Congressman Kim, Director Alkirk, Mr. Pelosi, dear guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Well, we know Mr. Pelosi doesn't refer to Paul Pelosi Sr. because he had a prior obligation last week, as we've been reporting. Now, if you check the Speaker, the Fresh Prince of San Fran, and if you thought Hunter Biden's business deals were shady, just wait. Paulie Jr. is on the payroll of 2 lithium mining companies, and Asia just happens to be a lithium gold mine. And Taiwan just happens to be a world leader in lithium battery production. He's also heavily invested in Singapore's energy sector. Wasn't that another stop on Nancy's trip? Oh, it was. And that sure looks like him right there. We've been calling and emailing this all day to confirm this. They won't pick up the phone or write back. But where the Fresh Prince does business, just a few months ago, his company struck up an EV battery deal there. What do you know? Nancy went to South Korea also. We didn't get any pictures of Paulie there, but maybe he took a quick trip himself to China alone. I mean, his mother's always been very interested in that country. Himself to China alone. I mean, his mother's always been very interested in that country. Just like Papa Paulie, Prince Pelosi will go wherever the money is. I mean, where his mother is. And he has a history of screwing people, just not in the same way Hunter does. 5 separate federal investigations are circling Pelosi Jr.'s companies. Paul Pelosi was allegedly, quote, hired by several firms that were subject to both federal and state probes, and meanwhile has connections to a host of fraudsters, rule breakers, and convicted criminals. Nancy Pelosi talks a great game about protecting seniors, but not the prince. One of his companies is being investigated for scamming sick and gullible elderly people out of their money. Does investment company, which the SEC said was run by convicted fraudsters, got tangled up in a slew of scandals, including a massive crypto scam. Classy. Paulie Jr. for bribing San Francisco city inspectors looking into his girlfriend's flop house. The Fresh Prince tried to pay them off by cutting a check for the rugby team. But the prince always skates, doesn't he? Neighbor Bang, who was born in Taiwan of all places, sued the prince, alleging he stole from her and even threatened her. Is Paul Pelosi Jr. really just Hunter Biden without the crack pipe? We don't